Good evening. Let's turn our Bibles to Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9. I said Mark 9, didn't I? I'm staring right at Mark 7. Back up a couple chapters. Mark 9, we looked at that a few weeks ago. Mark 7. Yes, Mark 7. We are going to be in starting verse 24 in Mark 7. And tonight we're going to look at the miracle in which Jesus heals the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman. And so that's what we're going to look at, the miracle there. Start in verse 24 of Mark 7. It says, "And from there he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon." Now, want to stop right there. The region of Tyre and Sidon, it is, anybody tell me anything about that area? Okay, those were wicked cities. Yes, that you get a point for that. They are wicked cities. They're often referred to as because of their wickedness. What part of the land of Israel are they in? Trick question. They're not in Israel. They're not in Israel. They are up on the coast. They're up on the coast, and they're actually in Syria. They're actually in Syria up there. And this would have been an area called Phoenicia. Today, that is modern-day Lebanon. That is up on the coast. And so this lady from the area of Tyre and Sidon is, and the fact that Jesus is going there is kind of remarkable. At this point in the ministry of Christ, he is beginning to get very recognizable in the area around Jerusalem and Galilee and the places that he frequented. And quite honestly, he had made some side trips to get away, really, is what it would amount to. Tyre and Sidon is a place where there wouldn't be any Jews. This is a place that if you were going to hide out, if you were a Jew and wanted to hide out where nobody knows you and nobody knows, that's the place to go. Somebody hid out in a little town called Zarephath. That is right next to Sidon. Do you remember who hid out in Zarephath in the Old Testament? Elijah. Yeah, that's where Elijah hid out. Elijah hid there when he was fleeing from Ahab and Jezebel. Jezebel was the Sidonian princess that Ahab married. So guess this is where Jezebel's from. If you rode into Sidon, and they would have a sign, home of, I don't know whether they bragged about Jezebel or not, but that's where she was from. And so that just kind of gives you a touch or a flavor of the kind of people that are from there. Very well known, immoral, wicked area, as Lois pointed out. It's an area that a good Jew wouldn't go to, as far as, and I'm putting that in quotes, okay? Obviously, Jesus was the sinless Son of God, so he was good. But it's just a place that the Pharisees, Sadducees wouldn't bother going to, because just of the quote-unquote type of people that lived there. They wouldn't go to that kind of place. But it's a good place to hide out if you want to get away from Pharisees and Sadducees and such. So anyway, he's there in Tyre and Sidon. And the second half of the verse. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. Well, his purpose in being there, like I said, is to kind of hide out, to lay low. And if you're going to do that, Tyre and Sidon, those two towns, good place to do that. Verse 25, but immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile. Now, that is not a news flash because really, pretty much everybody in that region would be Gentiles. These are not Jews in that area. And so she comes in, she's a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth. And of course, that means she's from that area of Tyre and Sidon. She's a native. And she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. So here, she is a Gentile, a native of that area, a Syrophoenician, not only a Gentile, but known to be among the worst of the Gentiles. But she hears about Jesus, and we don't know what she hears, but we know that she hears about him and understands that, that he, for whatever she heard, whether she heard he's a prophet or that he could perform miracles or whatever, but she comes to him and begs him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Well, why would she do that? Well, if you had a demon-possessed daughter, what would you do? You'd do pretty much anything you could, wouldn't you? I mean, what wouldn't you do to try to get that problem fixed? And so, she hears about Christ, and we don't know what she heard, but she hears enough that she knows she wants to come to Jesus, and she falls at his feet, and she begs him to please get rid of this demon from my daughter. And Jesus said to her, let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. This is one of the hardest statements that you're going to find in the life of Christ to look at and understand when you recognize, who Jesus is and how he is kind and compassionate. And because he's essentially calling her and her child a little dog, to a dog. And so, what's he trying to do by this? Is Jesus unkind? Is he being rude toward her? Is he trying to be dismissive of her? Okay, he's got his priorities. And also, as we've noted all through all these miracles, Jesus is trying to bring something out of these people. He's trying to bring something out of them he's ultimately not only wanting to help them with the healing, but help them themselves and draw them to a greater faith. Jesus, I don't believe, is really specifically calling her and her child a dog. He's basically saying what gets repeated, that, people would look at you and say, well, I'm here to feed the children. And why would you give the bread, or why would you give the food to the dogs? And this woman gives one of the wisest and most faith-filled answers you're ever going to find. And that's what I believe Jesus is trying to draw out of her. Oh, yeah. Right, yeah. And she calls him Lord. And so she's respectful back to him. And so I believe that, it was not a, that she didn't feel as slighted as we might feel. Also, so many times things get said and tone of voice makes all the difference. I mean, let's face it. The way that Jesus said that, we have no way of knowing. But there are ways in which he could say that you would not feel threatened, would not feel dismissed, that you would still feel his care and concern for her. And so, without knowing exactly how he said that, I think we certainly need to recognize that she takes it in a positive manner. She throws it back to him and says, like I say, one of the wisest things that anybody ever retorts back to Jesus, and that is, she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Even the dogs get a crumb every now and then. And so, wow, you talk about a statement of faith. You talk about a statement of humility. A statement of, she is not trying to pretend to be anything she's not. She knows she's a Gentile. She knows she's not one of God's people. She knows that she's separate from those. But yet she says, but even the dogs, even they get a crumb every now and then. I'm paraphrasing what she said, but even they get the crumbs that fall from the table that the children eat. And he said to her, "For this statement you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." Now, you'll notice in the next verse it says, verse 30, "And she went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone." We have noted throughout the study that we've looked at that Jesus has all different ways of going about healing people. And there is no one way that he does it, even when it comes to individual things. Like we looked at the man Legion, in which he cast the demons into the swine, and they did that. We saw last week, we looked at the one in which Jesus was coming down off the mountain with his disciples, and the man brought his son to the other disciples, and they couldn't cast out the demon, and while the demon throws the son into a convulsion, Jesus speaks to it and says to come out. And so, one, he sends him into the swine. This one he speaks and says for them to come out. And this one here, this is another example of Jesus not even being in the same location as the person being healed. The woman comes, apparently seeking for Jesus, and Jesus says, "Go on your way. Your daughter's healed. The demons left your daughter." And so here is, like I said, another instance in which Jesus is not there. And it goes to show further the way that he performed miracles. It shows again that the power to perform the miracles was not in the faith of the individuals. Although Jesus draws a great statement of faith from her. Who healed her? Well, Jesus did. And it was his statement that did that. When Jesus walked away from her, she was still a Gentile. She was still a Syrophoenician. We don't know anything about what was said to her beyond that. Whether she became a disciple or not, we don't know. We're not told that. And so we just have to kind of guess. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But because she asked, and because she insisted in faith, Jesus healed her daughter. Absolutely showed a mother's love. Yeah, she was willing to go into a man she didn't know and confront him, a man that she had known was a Jew, a man that really had no connection with her. He owed her nothing, but she had a daughter that was sick. She had a daughter that had a demon. And like you said, Janet, what extent does a mother's love go to? Well, she'd do about anything, wouldn't she? She'd attack the demon herself if she could and throw the demon out if it worked. She'd do that. I know that's the kind of thing that mothers would do. And so she's willing to do anything. And she's willing to do anything, and Jesus is willing to help her. And so what a great thing that is.
Is there a possibility here that this whole thing is a way of showing people that even the Gentiles observe a little bit of the things that she obviously knew what was going on. Even the Gentiles observed and picked up a little bit as towards the equality of Jews and Gentiles.
Yeah, Richard asked, is this kind of a show that the Gentiles are going to be, given a part of what Jesus is bringing? And of course, yeah, I believe so. I mean, this is a glimpse into that. Jesus also spends some time. We've already looked at some of it. We're going to do another miracle, the next miracle in this text. I figured we would get through this first one pretty quick. We're not quite done with it yet. But there's an area that Jesus keeps going back to called the Decapolis. It's where he healed Legion and where he's going to heal the man that was deaf that we're going to see in the next section here in Mark 7. But the area of the Decapolis was on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. Quite a ways from Tyre and Sidon, but he travels down, crosses the Sea of Galilee, and goes to the Decapolis on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. That area of the Decapolis was an area in which it had a lot of Gentiles. And in fact, it was there that the 2,000 pigs were. Well, what Jew would be a pig farmer? None. So, those are Jews that were eating those, because even if a Jew was a pig farmer, who would buy his pigs? Nobody would. And so this area that he's getting ready to go to, leaving from Tyre and Sidon and going to the Decapolis, is another area rich with Gentiles. So yeah, I believe you're exactly right, that even though he's not overtly stating that purpose, when the church begins and looking at it from the hindsight that we get to look at it, we can look and say, okay, yeah, here's a Gentile. And then we see, the Decapolis, the people he runs into there, and that there's some Gentiles there. We also see that Jesus, in like the parable of the Good Samaritan, makes a Samaritan the hero. Well, when the church begins, in Acts chapter 1, Jesus, right before he goes back into heaven, he tells his disciples that you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and the outermost part of the world. He gave them the roadmap right there before he ascended into heaven of how the church was going to grow. It was going to start in Jerusalem on Pentecost. It was going to spread out through Judea, through the tribe of Judea, and then it was going to go to Samaria, and it does with Philip and the others later in the book of Acts, and then it was going to go to the rest of the world, and we're still working on that, going to the rest of the world. But that's exactly the way it's going to be. And so he hinted at that, and this miracle we're just looking at tonight, and then also his time in Decapolis is a foreshadowing, you might say, if you will, and a glimpse to them of who he is and what he's going to be, because these are areas that are going to later on be evangelized, that are going to later on receive the knowledge, the truth. Okay. Any other questions or comments here? Can I talk just a minute about what it means to be demon-possessed in that day? That's about all I can say. It's about a minute's worth. You know, in the ancient world, and even up until just a few hundred, 200 or 300 years ago, a whole lot of stuff got labeled as demon possession that wasn't, okay? Things like schizophrenia and other mental disorders got labeled as that. Now, I believe that the Bible and the Bible times that those were real demons, okay? But a lot of ancient peoples have misidentified things as being demon possession. And so, on one hand, I'll say that much of human history has talked about demons, and a lot of that's been incorrect because it's been misidentified mental illness, like schizophrenia and a whole bunch of other things. In the New Testament, in that time frame, the demons were not multiple personalities, but actually demons that had knowledge. You see, a schizophrenic doesn't have extra knowledge. You know, the demons that Jesus interacted with knew exactly who he was. Like when we studied Legion. You remember when Jesus got off the boat, the man Legion runs to Jesus and falls down and says, "Son of David, what are you going to do with me?" The 12 men in the boat didn't know exactly who Jesus was. This demon-possessed man that didn't wear clothes and lived in the tombs knew who Jesus was better than the 12. Now that doesn't happen because of schizophrenia. That happens because the beings that inhabited that man, Legion, were supernatural. They were otherworldly. They were spirit beings. And so because of that, they didn't have to be told that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God, the creator of all things. They knew that. And therefore, Legion had that insight that even the 12 apostles didn't quite get. So, yes, I believe that the demon possession of the New Testament, in the New Testament times, was a real live demon possession. What it also looks like is to be a phenomenon of that time frame. You don't see that kind of demon possession in the Old Testament. I don't know of those kind of things. Now it talks about Saul having an evil spirit, but that's not talking about a demon possession. That's an ill-tempered spirit because of his hard-heartedness, because of the way he had turned against God, and then God was going to punish him, and it was not a demon possession. And so we don't see that in the Old Testament, and we really don't see that much beyond the New Testament times. And so this is just me, but I categorize that as basically a first century phenomenon for the time that Christ was on the earth and the time that the apostles were alive on the earth.
Are those the ones that have been cast out now that are waiting for the judgment that you read about?
And yeah, they could well be the ones that have been cast out that we see mentioned at times in Revelation and other things, yeah, that are in that. But I tell you what, I've gone more than a minute. But if you want to know all about angels and demons, come to the Tuesday morning class. Richard's going to straighten us out on all that. he is going to start on that in a few weeks. So anyway, so that is going to be what we're going to study on that time frame. So if you get a chance to come be a part of that, then we'll spend more than a minute or two on it. Without going too far down the path, anything else that you'd like to ask or add to that? I mean,
Like you say, it seems to be just germane to that time period.
it does.
Because it provides an opportunity to contrast with who Jesus was,
Absolutely.
and an opportunity to prove that he was exactly who he said he was. He had power over
Right.
those spirits.
And because we find in the New Testament that we don't have power to perform miracles anymore. So therefore, there's no one that has the miraculous power to therefore cast out demons. It seems inconsistent with what I know about God and free will that individuals would be doomed to be demon possessed without power to cast them out. And so that would be a really hard thing for me to swallow. If demon possession were still around today, I would have to believe, and I don't, and I would have to believe that God's people would possess the power to cast out demons. And yes, I've seen an Exorcist movie or two. And anyway, might make a good movie, but no. Tom?
I believe what Mark said on that's true. I believe those demons were there to verify Christ.
Yeah. They are some of the greatest witnesses of who Jesus is. I mean, the statement that Legion made when he falls in front of Jesus' feet is the great confession, basically. You are the Most High God. Well, it took 3 years for his apostles to come up with that conclusion and a whole lot of miracles. They knew exactly who he was. The demons did. And so, yeah, they're great witnesses because of what they are able to state and they understand. So they get it. And yes, it shows the power that Jesus had. Who has power over Satan? Only Jesus and those that Jesus gives implicit power to have control over them. So, any other questions or comments about that? I mean, that is a big path. I don't want to duck or dodge the questions, but also, we don't want to spend the whole time on that.
Didn't Christ take out one demon that he also said to the demon, don't enter back into him again, didn't he?
Yeah, that was something that was often said. That was the one that we looked at last week in Mark 9 about the one that had been in the boy, and of course that was a mute spirit. That one didn't communicate with him, but yet he cast him out and told him not to come back into him, and commanded that he wouldn't. So.
I got lots of questions, but I'll save it for Richard.
Okay. Well, you can tease us and at least ask one of them, Dan.
Well, I know, as you all know, my wife and I searched through lots of churches before we found this. And I had, people from mission trips in third world countries, I don't know if they really saw demons possess people, but it sure sounds like it,
Mm-hmm.
And when you say you got to have a miracle working power to expel one, a lot of things were called miracles, but Jesus said demons were cast out with prayer.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot to research, and I'm looking
Oh,
forward
yeah.
to Richard's class.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking it up pretty big, so you better deliver, But yeah, you're right. And I'll tell you, I've known a couple people that I just kind of scratched my head and thought, and that's no joke, okay? I'm only saying that half joking, because There'd been a couple people that there was a guy at college that, he was,
I think there's a lot
Anyway.
of things in the Bible we're not meant to fully understand.
I certainly understand that I don't have all the answers for sure. And I'll help Richard out a little bit. I know he doesn't have all the answers either. He's got a bunch of answers, but he doesn't have all of them.
Then some of them asked him, said, don't torment us before our time, so they knew their time was coming.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the ones that he cast into the pigs, into the swine, is, not asked not to torment them. So they did that. Okay. Yes, and yeah, a lot of things go on in some of those in some of the foreign countries, but makes me wonder why, if they were demon possessing those people, why they wouldn't be demon possessing us. Here, because we're not so righteous that we would avoid that like they wouldn't. I mean, there would be those kind of people here too, and it's kind of sometimes easier to get away with things on.
Of course, with the different levels of people here, they're the people that nobody notices.
Right. Yeah. And I think that even today, we here in America might be able to better correctly identify different mental illnesses or whatever, or different drugs. I mean, there's some cultures that that they take such different drugs. I mean, you go down to the Amazons, hard to tell what some of them are taking, and different things, and just the different ways that they would act in relation to that. And anyway, so I'm always skeptical of most things generally, but certainly I also don't feel I figured everything out either. That there's some things that I scratch my head and just say, I can't explain that one, as to why and who and what's going on in that one. And anyway, but I do, if there would be modern day demon possession, then I believe there's got to be some way that God's people could cast them out, whether it be through prayer or whatever, that specifically that we would not be held hostage by Satan without the opportunity to have power over him, because that's why Jesus came, is so that we would have power over Satan and not be held by sin and Satan and those things. So anyway, but I do not believe personally that demon possession is a modern phenomenon. Although I will grant that I've seen some things and think, I don't know, but nothing's convinced me of that completely. Any other questions or comments?
Does it say anywhere in the Bible why the demons chose who they did to possess?
Boy, that'd be a good question. I like that question, but no, it doesn't. That would be, we don't know. I mean, here, the most innocent of all people, a tiny little girl, a young child. Why? I mean, what could a young girl possibly do to deserve to have a demon possessing them? Obviously, this is not a meritorious thing, or somebody that has just committed so much evil that the demons find a welcome home. This is a little child. And, well, that's a tough one, because, that's the least likely person you would think. So I don't believe in any way that it is, that this is an individual that made a deal with the devil and now they're demon possessed. Because, that's not, this is a small child. So.
Could I inject something here?
Sure.
Obviously, I don't know.
If I asked you not to, would you stop? Well, come on. Go ahead, Brian.
With the demon possession, and you talk about it was a little girl in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who do you think would hurt the most if this demon would take the life of that little girl?
Yeah.
She'll be back in God's hands
Mm-hmm.
back. But what about the mother?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's
I don't believe this thing about, they're taking care of my sin.
Mhm.
If anything, I'd have to reverse that because, I've got Kevin and Lisa.
That's probably his last gargle.
all right. I'm not sure where to go from that, Brian.
Well, we don't know where to go specifically on any of these things, as I understand it. That's the reason I clarified that I don't know any more about it than you do, but I'd like to make my presentation.
Gotcha.
Now, what has the mother done?
Right. Well,
Who's going to do all the suffering? The little girl,
Yeah.
she'll be fine.
well, and that's the way it is with any and all of these things. I mean, the family would suffer, and the parents would certainly suffer, and it's the way with anything else. An individual that's sick, the whole family suffers as a result of it. And so, yes, we feel the most for the little girl, but yet everybody else is got the pain and suffering and angst with her.
The little girl hasn't done anything to deserve.
Yeah, she certainly hasn't brought this upon herself. But back to Jamie's question, we have no indication why anybody gets demon possessed. And that's I don't know.
Why do we receive certain diseases today?
That's true. I mean, we don't know. And it could be, and this is just me, okay? This is all this is. It could be that, also because the demon possession was to show the power of Christ, it could very well have been those individuals that would be in the pathway of Christ that he would be in contact with to cast out. That's an answer I feel good with. I feel comfortable with that answer, but I don't know that that's necessarily the right answer. But, that could be.
How prevalent it was.
Yeah, we don't know how prevalent that was. Yeah. And that was after Christ. That was with Paul and Barnabas, the young lady that was telling fortunes. That was after. So it did not end with the death of Christ. So it did continue into the time of the early part of the church.
I bet the Apostle Paul I bet he had his opinion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He wasn't usually short for that.
I'd like to know what that was.
Yeah, I know, but we don't have that. That's the thing. That would be the thing. I'd love to have Paul. There's a handful of things I'd love to have a further clarification on Paul's opinion, but
Well, why don't you just have a basic cover all of those things that hasn't been covered yet, and Richard will present it to us Sunday morning.
well,
The class starts on Tuesday, but I think we'll be here till Sunday.
probably. Yeah. 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 I think Richard's got his work cut out for him, and I might have made it worse.
His idea was this thing.
Hey, you want to study demons and angels and Satan. So, anyway. Okay, well, I thought we were going to talk about the deaf man. I guess we're going to talk about him next week. She goes home and finds the daughter, and the demon's gone. And, what a glorious and wonderful thing that would be. All right, any other questions or comments out of all that? All right. Here's my walk away take on this. We talk about the blessings of God and the great things that God gives. But the crumbs off of God's table are still pretty good. Even the crumbs. I've done a sermon before many years ago on that concept, the crumbs that come from God's table. If that's all I get's the crumbs that come off of his table, then I'll, you probably be all right. It shows you also the abundance that comes from God's table. The abundance from his table is such that even the crumbs can do amazing things. And so, just a good thought, maybe sometimes that might be the thing we might ask for. Lord, I'll just a crumb or two off of your table, and because I know whatever comes from you, it's going to be so good and such a great blessing. And it's a small thing for you. Our big problems are really pretty small compared to what God's got to work with His resources and the difficulties. And I mean, let's face it, if we get a crumb every now and then, we'll be all right. Okay? All right. Go ahead, Will. Ring the bell.